The organisms we chose for this presentation are the dogfish shark and cacti. The dogfish shark is an aquatic predatory animal, and the cacti are photosynthetic plants found in hot, dry areas across the world. For the dogfish shark, it is from the domain Eukaryae in the Animalia kingdom. More specifically, it is from the Chordata phylum, and it is in the class of Chondriacthes. Its order is Squaliformes from the family Squalidae. Its genus and species, aka its scientific name, is Squalus achinithia. We are now going to discuss the classifications of the cactus. Its domain is eukaryote. The cactus is from the Plantae kingdom. It is from the Traeophytes phylum, and it is from the Megalophyceae class. The order is from Caryotophyles and the Acarthocereus genus. Finally, the cactus is from the cacti family. We will talk about the methods and reproductive systems of the dogfish shark and the cactus. The male dogfish shark has an organ called the internal testes, genital ducts, urogenital papillae or sinus, syphilon sacs, and claspers. The claspers are stout, grooved copulatory organs on the inner side of the pelvic fins. The female sharks have a cloacal openings between the pelvic fins and the internal ovaries, which are paired. The eggs travel through the asterium to oviducts through the shell glands. Most eggs will develop in the uteri. All fertilization in dogfish sharks is internal. Much of the courtship rituals of the dogfish shark is unknown. We know that the male will twist its body around the female, and the reproduction happens in the winter season offshore. After mating comes the oviviparous development. This lasts 4 to 6 months. During this time, the membrane around the egg, which provides nourishment, will break down. After the membrane breaks down, the yolk sac provides nutrients to the fetus. It lasts the longest time, 17 to 19 months. Overall, the dogfish shark can have up to 24 months gestation period. This is thought to be the longest period of any vertebrate. A female dogfish shark produces live young. They can have litters of about 2 to 11 pups. The dogfish pups are anywhere between 20 to 30 centimeters long or 8 to 12 inches. Female dogfish reach maturity at around 19 to 20 years old, while the male dogfish sharks reach maturity at 11 years old. Moving on to the reproduction of the cactus reproduces through male and female parts of the flower. The male part produces pollen, which is captured by pollinators. The cacti produce brightly colored flowers in order to attract birds, bats, and insects, which are all pollinators. We have the anatomy of the cactus here, where the flower performs reproductive functions. The skin prevents water evaporation and protects against insects. The stem segments helps the cactus store water, and the ribs allow the cactus to expand without splitting and quickly absorbing water. The areola contains spines and the barbs glycida, which protect the cacti. Pollen combined with egg cells and other flowers to create seeds for reproduction. The water storage tissue has cells which expand and contract to hold and store water. The pith stores and distributes nutrients, and the vascular bundle distributes water from the roots throughout the cacti. The vascular tissue is dense and woody tissue that provides structure, and the root system quickly stores water and moves it to water storage tissue. When pollen reaches the female egg cells, a fruit is developed. The cacti fruit contains fertilized seeds, which are scattered away from the parent plant by nature. The survival rate of these new plants are very low, which is why cacti produce many seeds. Certain cacti have the ability to reproduce asexually and sexually. This means they have the ability to produce without flowers nor seeds. The prickly pear cactus have weak connecting joints along their stems. When a stem is knocked off and connects with the ground, roots are able to form. This will produce a new plant which is able to develop its own flowers and seeds.
The similarities between the reproductive processes of these organisms are that in order for reproduction to take place, typically an egg has to be fertilized. These processes are called fertilization in sharks and pollination in cacti. There are a few scenarios where cacti can produce asexually, however. This can happen in certain cacti, if a portion of their stem falls off due to conditions like weight or wind and falls to the ground, where it can then develop into its own plant. This is often referred to as a type of propagation. Both of these organisms have adapted to be able to successfully reproduce in unique but quite opposite environments. One has adapted to successfully give birth underwater, and the other in hot, dry desert environments where most organisms cannot typically survive. The differences between the reproductive processes of these organisms are that dogfish sharks can reproduce sexually, while cacti can reproduce sexually or asexually. Sexual reproduction involves combining DNA from two parent individuals, a male and a female, to form a fertilized gamete or sex cell in the female individual. As asexual reproduction, however, does not involve the exchange of DNA or two parent individuals. In asexual reproduction, a single organism creates an exact genetic replica of itself. Dogfish sharks also experience embryonic development, where they are living inside their mothers in order to grow and be born and able to survive. Pollinated cacti produce a fruit or flower that have the seeds inside them that have the goal of reproduction. Dogfish sharks are most similar to a K-selected organism because they have few live young that typically survive to live in their pack and hunt and mature. Cacti are R-selected species that have lots of seeds, of which very few, if any, go on to actually become plants. Cacti also rely on pollinators such as bees, birds, bats, or even wind in order to reproduce, whereas dogfish sharks do not need an intermediate species or event to reproduce. Continuing on to discuss the digestive processes and nutrition requirements, it's important to note that they will be very different because one organism, the dogfish shark, is a consumer while the cacti are producers. Consumers are organisms that get their energy by eating other organisms, while producers gather light energy from the sun and convert it into chemical energy. Dogfish sharks feed on other aquatic organisms. Specifically, they occupy the trophic level of tertiary consumers. They can also be classified as heterotrophic organisms since they get their energy by consuming organisms. They are incapable of making energy on their own. Some unique features of the dogfish sharks are that they are opportunistic feeders, meaning they will eat what they can when they can and are not very picky about time or type of prey. These animals also like to hunt in packs like dogs, and this helps them to round up prey so that they can feed more safely and efficiently. This is an example of an oceanic food chain that you might expect to see a dogfish shark as a part of as a tertiary consumer. From this, you can see that they are high on the list of predators, but are not quite at the top, meaning they can be preyed upon by larger organisms. As far as the nutrition sources for dogfish sharks, it really varies depending on their size. The larger of these sharks like to eat types of schooling fish, while the smaller ones like to eat squids and jellyfish. The main source of nutrients for them is crustaceans that they can easily prey upon and eat quickly for energy. For the dogfish sharks, their digestive system is similar to those of other animals. They intake food through their mouth, which moves through their system by peristalsis until it reaches its final destination of the cloaca or anus. Peristalsis is the squeezing and squishing of the food through the digestive system, specifically the esophagus. Like humans, these sharks have both the primary and accessory digestive organs. Primary organs are what organs are directly related to digestion, such as the stomach or intestines. Accessory organs are what help with digestion by providing outside resources like the gallbladder or pancreas that help with digestion indirectly. The dogfish have a unique esophagus that is lined with papillae, which helps to keep the esophagus sealed and watertight, which then connects to the shark's U-shaped stomach that has folds in it called rugae, that run long ways through the entire stomach, which increases the surface area and aids in nutrient absorption. Moving to the cactus plant, this organism is a primary producer, meaning it gets all of its nutrients through photosynthesis fueled by the sun. This can also be described as the organism being autotrophic or getting its energy on its own without the need of another organism. Plants like these convert energy from the light of the sun to the food they use for living and growing. What makes cacti unique is that they are a special type of plant called cam plants that are able to survive in extremely hot, dry conditions. The abbreviation CAM stands for crassulacean acid metabolism, which is related to the characteristic of these plants where they only accept CO2 during the nighttime. This protects their stomata from the extreme temperatures they live in and preserves their limited supply of H2O, since they live in dry environments. It can be compared to the plant holding their breath during the day and releasing it at night. The digestive system of the cactus is all related to its ability to perform photosynthesis effectively. Cacti have a really shallow system of roots which allow them to quickly take in any water that may be in the soil around them. Then they use this water supply to perform photosynthesis with the CO2 they harvest during the night and hold during the day, which creates the important product of glucose and the beneficial to us byproduct of oxygen gas. They hold in the CO2 by keeping their stomata closed and not allowing any gas exchange to occur, which could endanger the plant to drying out due to high temperatures. While the differences are the most obvious to point out, let's begin with the similarities between the digestive systems of these organisms. Both organisms have extremely complex systems that allow them to create the type of energy that is best for them. While the sources are different, the unique digestive systems have both adapted in a way that allows the organisms to gather as much nutrients as possible. As a result of this, both species have been successful in surviving to reproduce and continue growing their population. Now, the differences are quite vast. The cactus is a primary producer, which, as mentioned earlier, means it gets all of its energy in the form of light from the sun. This is then converted through CAM photosynthesis into glucose, which nourishes the organism. The cacti is also classified as an autotroph because it relies on only itself to produce and make energy. This contrasts with the digestive system of the shark, which is a consumer and gets energy by eating other organisms. This also classifies the shark as a heterotroph because it gets all of its energy from organisms besides itself.
All right, now we're going to move on to respiration. So basically how these things breathe. Dogfish sharks, they have evolved structures to minimize the energy consumption that it takes for them to breathe. And the structures are called lamella. And they have these lamella have little spiracles in them and their gill slits. And the spiracles will open to release pressure so they could intake as much water as possible. And the water is absorbed into the bloodstream through the primary and secondary lamella to maximize the oxygen absorption. And it does this through countercurrent flow. That's how it takes in the water. Countercurrent flow is when the shark is going against the current of high oxygen water as it goes in through the mouth and out the gills. That's why it has internal gills and external gills. And since the water is moving in one direction of the current, and it likes this high oxygen water, so it gets as much oxygen as possible. And yeah, the secondary lamella is the gill filaments, gill arches, and gill rakers. Those will open and expand to get as much surface area as possible so it can absorb as much as possible. And now the cactus. They have these little pores on their quote unquote skin called stomata. Stomata are basically holes that open and close so it can take in carbon dioxide and also push out oxygen. And it only does the pores only open at night. So it does nighttime photosynthesis, so it basically breathes at night and stays closed during the day while it absorbs the water and sunlight it needs. And they do produce oxygen. And it does not take in sugars because it's really complex for the cactus to take in. And they take in the carbon dioxide at night. And photosynthesis versus respiration, basically respiration, the food is oxidized. Like the sunlight's oxidized, the carbon dioxide taking in is oxidizing it, and the water is being oxidized. Now, the things they have in common, they both evolved certain structures for efficiency because shark needed to evolve to get as much oxygen to the water, and cactuses evolved to get as much water into the dry land, so it maintains the water that it has. They're also both dangerous because sharks eat things and cactuses don't touch them. And the differences that they have is sharks live in very moist environments and cactuses do very dry. One loves water, one likes it but doesn't want too much. And their kinds of respiration. So like a shark will breathe kind of through water, and the cactus will just sort of prepare itself for photosynthesis. And it's like, it's still breathing, it's just not as complex, I guess. Okay, I think that's it.